Hello and thank you for being here. I hope you're doing well today. My name is Think Revenge. If you find value in stories like this, you're welcome to subscribe and stay with me for future ones. Which city are you watching from? You can share it in the comments. Now let me tell you what happened. I always thought courtrooms were loud places, full of raised voices and dramatic gestures. The one I walked into that morning was quiet, almost clinical. The air smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant. Wooden benches lined the room, polished smooth by years of anxious hands. My sister sat 2 rows ahead of me, perfectly relaxed, as if she were waiting for a movie to start. When she glanced back and caught my eye, she smiled. It wasn't warm. It was small, controlled, and confident. The kind of smile you wear when you believe the ending is already written in your favor. That smile had followed me for most of my adult life. Growing up, my sister was the loud one. She spoke first, decided quickly, and never doubted herself. I was quieter, I listened. When our parents talked about the future, they talked to her. When relatives visited, they praised her ambition. I learned early that being overlooked wasn't the same as being invisible, but it often felt close. When our father fell ill, the imbalance became clearer. I was the one who rearranged my work schedule to take him to appointments. I handled prescriptions, insurance calls, and meals he could keep down. My sister visited when it suited her, usually with someone else in tow, always with a story about how busy she was. Our mother noticed, I think, but she was tired, and tired people choose the path of least resistance. After our father died, my sister took control of everything without asking. She said it made sense because she was better with paperwork. I didn't argue. At the time, I was still grieving, still trying to sleep through the night without waking up to the sound of hospital monitors that no longer existed. I trusted that fairness would happen on its own. It didn't. Months later, when our mother moved into assisted living, I found out that decisions had been made without me. Accounts consolidated, property discussed, and as it turned out, redirected. When I asked questions, my sister laughed lightly and told me I was being sensitive. She said I should be grateful she was handling things, so I didn't have to worry. The first time she dismissed me in front of someone else was at the facility's office. I asked about a document I hadn't seen before. She cut me off mid-sentence and told the administrator, "She gets confused with legal stuff. I'll explain it to her later." The administrator nodded, already turning away from me. I remember standing there, my mouth half open, feeling smaller than I had in years. That moment stayed with me. I started paying closer attention. I requested copies of forms. I read slowly, sometimes twice. I noticed signatures that looked rushed, initials in places our mother never used to initial. When I brought these things up privately, my sister's tone changed. She became sharp, irritated. She told me I was accusing her of things I didn't understand. I didn't accuse, I documented. I kept a notebook. Dates, times, what was said, who was present. I asked neutral questions by email instead of phone, so answers were written down. I took photos of envelopes and postmarks. None of this felt dramatic. It felt necessary, like setting bones so they healed straight instead of crooked. The day I decided to speak to a lawyer wasn't a burst of courage. It was quiet. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea I didn't drink and realized that if I didn't act, I would spend the rest of my life explaining to myself why I hadn't. The lawyer listened more than she spoke. She asked careful questions and didn't rush me. When I handed over copies of documents, she paused at one page longer than the others. She didn't react, but she asked where I'd gotten it. I told her. She nodded and said we'd request official records. That's when process took over. Letters were sent. Responses came back slower than my sister expected. She called me for the first time in months, her voice tight, asking why I was doing this. I told her I just wanted clarity. She laughed and said I'd regret embarrassing myself. In court, she looked unbothered. She wore a tailored suit and that same confident smile. When it was her turn to speak, she spoke smoothly about responsibility and family duty. She implied I'd been distant, uninvolved. I didn't interrupt. I watched the judge's pen move across the page. Then the judge asked for the document my lawyer had flagged. It was a single-page amendment, filed months after our father's death. The judge read it silently at first. My sister leaned back slightly, still smiling. When the judge read one line out loud, the room seemed to contract. It was about the date the document was signed and the medical assessment on record for that same day. The line was simple, factual, and impossible to argue with. The judge asked a question, direct and calm, about how a person assessed as lacking capacity could have signed a legal amendment alone. My sister's smile didn't vanish dramatically. It slipped, just a little, enough to notice. The rest unfolded without raised voices. Records were compared, timelines aligned. My notebook entries matched official logs. The judge didn't accuse, she clarified. And with each clarification, the story my sister had told lost another piece of its structure. When the ruling came, it wasn't poetic. It was precise. The amendment was invalidated. Assets were reevaluated. An independent administrator was appointed. Boundaries were set in legal language that didn't care about sibling hierarchies or practiced confidence. Outside the courtroom, my sister didn't say much. She looked at me once, searching, maybe, for something familiar to push against. I didn't give her anything. I wished her well and left. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. There were forms to sign, meetings to attend, and adjustments to make. Our mother's care continued without disruption. I slept better, not because I'd won, but because I'd stopped pretending things were fine when they weren't. I don't speak to my sister often now. When we do communicate, it's brief and clear. No explanations, no defenses, just facts. That boundary is new and it holds. People sometimes ask if it was worth it. I tell them it wasn't about winning. It was about standing in a room where I'd once been dismissed and realizing I didn't have to accept that role anymore. Quiet justice doesn't announce itself. It just changes what happens next. In the weeks after the hearing, time reorganized itself around paperwork and waiting. The independent administrator the court appointed contacted me first, then my sister, then the assisted living facility. She introduced herself plainly, explained her role, and laid out a schedule. Inventory of accounts. Verification of property titles. Review of past transactions going back 3 years. She said it would take time, and that everyone would receive the same information at the same time. No side conversations. No shortcuts. That alone changed the temperature of everything. A week later, I received a formal packet by registered mail. It included a timeline request and a list of documents I was asked to provide. I already had most of them scanned and labeled. When I dropped the envelope at the post office, I noticed my hands were steady. That surprised me. For so long, anything connected to my family had come with a low-level tremor. This didn't. The administrator's office scheduled interviews. Mine was first. It wasn't adversarial. She asked how decisions had been made historically, who handled finances before our father died, and when I first noticed inconsistencies. I answered carefully, sticking to dates and actions. When I didn't know something, I said so. She didn't push. My sister's interview happened the following week. I didn't attend. I found out later that she arrived with a binder she'd clearly assembled in a hurry. Some tabs were mislabeled. Some statements were missing pages. None of that would have mattered if the core facts had held. They didn't. By the end of the month, the administrator issued preliminary findings. Certain withdrawals were flagged. A property transfer was placed under review. Temporary restrictions were applied to prevent further changes until the review was complete. My sister called me that night, for the second time since court. Her voice was controlled but brittle. She asked if I was satisfied now. I told her the process wasn't about satisfaction. It was about accuracy. She hung up without replying. The assisted living facility adjusted their records quickly. They had been uncomfortable before, I think, but unsure how to intervene. With clear authority in place, they corrected contact lists, financial guarantors, and consent forms. When I visited our mother, nothing felt different on the surface. She still asked the same questions, still liked her tea at the same temperature. But when staff spoke to me, they spoke directly. They didn't glance past me for confirmation. That mattered more than I expected. The review took 3 months. During that time, I learned how slow accountability can be and how thorough it needs to be to last. Statements were cross-referenced. Signatures were compared. One transaction, in particular, stood out. A large transfer that my sister had described as reimbursement for expenses. Receipts didn't support it. The administrator requested clarification. None came that held up. At the end of the 3rd month, a final report was issued. It wasn't dramatic. It listed findings, conclusions, and corrective actions. Assets were redistributed according to the original estate plan. The property transfer was reversed. Future decisions required joint notification, but not joint approval. A professional would manage finances going forward. My sister contested one point briefly. Her lawyer filed a narrow objection. It was denied without a hearing. After that, things went quiet. We didn't meet again in person for a long time. When we did, it was at a family event months later. She was polite, distant. She asked about work. I answered. We didn't discuss the case. We didn't need to. The structure around us had changed, and with it, the expectations. I adjusted my own habits slowly. I stopped over-explaining. I stopped filling silences that weren't mine to manage. When decisions came up regarding our mother's care, I reviewed the information and responded within the framework provided. No more, no less. One afternoon, about a year after the hearing, the administrator called to let me know her role was concluding. Everything was stable. Ongoing management had been transferred to a firm with clear reporting standards. She thanked me for being consistent and prepared. It felt strange to be thanked for something that had once been framed as troublemaking. After the call, I sat for a while and let the quiet settle. Not the heavy kind, the kind that means nothing is about to drop. People sometimes imagine justice as a moment, a sentence, a reaction. For me, it was a series of small, orderly steps that returned things to their proper places. It was being believed without being pitied. It was watching a system do what it's meant to do when given enough information and patience. I still think about that courtroom sometimes. Not about my sister's expression, but about the judge's voice when she read that line. Neutral. Careful, final. That was the sound of something unbalanced being corrected. My life isn't perfect now, it's just clearer, and that clarity has been enough.